Hi, I'm Abby. I have a lot of records, and this is Vinyl Monday. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the series where once a week I sit down and just talk about albums that I love. If 20-ish minute deep dives aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds, both here as well as over on my Instagram. We are 10 episodes in on this season of Vinyl Monday. Can you believe we're already a fifth of the way through season 2? I can't. So I make a game out of guessing what album I'm gonna cover next. If you want to play along, all you gotta do is check on my community tab. I post lots of fun things over there, polls, behind the scenes, and that's where you get your hint. But here's the thing. I have a little bit of explaining to do for myself. I actually revealed all of the past 10 albums before I'd even sat down to film the season premiere. Sgt. Pepper's Sticky Fingers, LA Woman, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, Physical Graffiti, Cheap Thrills, the Almost Famous soundtrack, Wish You Were Here, Zeppelin 4, and finally, Bob Dylan's Blonde on Blonde were all revealed in reverse order on an Instagram post I made in like freaking September. And none of you picked up on it! Listen, I am a known Taylor Swift fan. I am all about my Easter eggs. There are Easter eggs in my videos that you won't be finding for months, maybe even a year. The game is never as easy as you think it's gonna be. But here's the final album of that bunch. Here's Blonde on Blonde, and let's take this out of the plastic. My copy is clearly Beat to Hell, and it is a stereo repress. It's super easy to tell what is an original / early press of the bunch and what is not. This is a beater copy. I don't really play this one much at all, especially seeing as my favorite song on this album, the grooves are worn completely smooth. It's smooth, people. Smooth. You're gonna see it in the B-roll. It is flat. But I do have a slightly more playable copy. I have my MoFi 45 RPM box set. It's kind of a hassle to play since it's all running at 45 and you have to switch the album over 3 times instead of twice, but it is a wonderful keepsake item. Don't worry, I will be showing plenty of this copy in the B-roll. No, it's not the wear on my copy. If you look at my MoFi box set, you'll see that the cover was intentionally blurry. So why is this shot blurry? There's a pretty simple reason. They photographed it outside in January in New York City, and it was brick. Oh my god, it just occurred to me that you guys might not know what brick means. Okay, so I am very clearly from New England. Yes, I am from the Northeast United States. Some people have guessed that I'm from California, and I just kind of laugh at that. From November to April, the weather is horrible here, and we are living in a tundra. I get maybe 2 hours of sunlight in this room, and I use them to film, and we literally got snow the other night. A certain subset of young New Englanders, instead of saying it's fucking cold, we just say it's brick. It's not like we're trying not to swear. New Englanders swear up a storm. It's just that saying it's brick is a little shorter. So now you know some New England stoner slang. You can pepper it into your everyday conversations. I will absolutely be making t-shirts of it if I am ever socially irrelevant enough to do so. You're welcome, and I'm sorry. Anyway, Dylan didn't care if it was brick. He didn't like wearing big bulky coats as they weren't stylish enough for him. Dylan was a total fashion victim. That's why he had on his little brown jacket and gave Susie Rotolo the big green parka to wear on the Freewheelin' cover. He didn't want her to be cold, and he just wanted to look cool. So again, instead of wearing a big parka, Dylan wears his little brown suede jacket. Jerry must have been the same, championing fashion over practicality, because both of them were shivering and they had to get this shot really, really fast. Hence why it's blurry. There was a clean version of this shot. It appears on one of the Bootlegs album covers, but Dylan liked this version more because it captured the energy of the music. Speaking of Dylan's clothes, this is the first of 3 albums in a row that he's wearing this little brown suede jacket. He also wears it on the cover of John Wesley Harding and Nashville Skyline. A lot of Dylan listeners call Blonde on Blonde the last of his classic era trio of albums. I call it the first of his jacket trio. I'm actually holding this sideways because the gatefold opens up down like this to give you the whole shot. But if you want to take your album out, then it opens this way. All of this photography was done by the legendary Jerry Schatzberg. Oops. I love all of his work with Dylan. There's a whole photo book of Jerry and Dylan's work together that I've had on my Christmas list for like 3 years now. You can tell Dill was really comfortable with Jerry, and when you're comfortable with the photographer, you get some really fun shots. Taking a closer look at the gatefold, let's open this back up. Schatzberg had a photo of Claudia Cardinale in his portfolio, which he ended up throwing onto this cover. The photo was used to credit Jerry for his work on the jacket, but it was also used without Claudia's permission. Mono copies of Blonde on Blonde with the so-called Cardinale cover will run you fat stacks of change. It is one of my personal grails. Honestly, it'd be a grail to have a copy of Blonde on Blonde that is easily playable and also not beat to shit. So why is this called Blonde on Blonde? There are lots of ideas floating around out there, and here are a few of them that seem most possible to me. Blonde on Blonde is most likely a reference to Brecht on Brecht, or even White Square on White. It's also likely a reference to the color wood of the guitars used to record this album. It might also be a reference to Brian Jones and his girlfriend at the time, Anita Pallenberg. They had matching blonde bobs. Or it could be a reference to 2 of Warhol's superstars, Edie Sedgwick and Nico. Both will become important a little later. On Blonde, of course, you have Bob Dylan on vocals, guitar, piano, harmonica, and writing all of these songs. With him are a constantly rotating cast of characters as the session musicians. I'm just gonna read all of these from my notes so I don't miss anybody, because there are a lot of people on this thing. We have Al Cooper on organ, Jerry Kennedy on guitar, Wayne Moss also on guitar, Harry Sturzelecki on bass, Bill Akins on keys, Pig Robbins on piano and keys, Charlie McCoy on pretty much all of the above instruments plus the trumpet, Kenneth Buttrey on drums, Wayne Butler playing the trombone on Rainy Day Women, and on the New York sessions, you have Paul Griffin on piano and Bobby Gregg on drums. Special guests include Rick Danko and Robbie Robertson of Dylan's band The Hawks, soon to be known as The Band. Rick dropped by the New York sessions while Robbie played with Dylan in Nashville. We also have songwriter Joe South on bass. This record was produced by Bob Johnston. So from 1965 through 1966, Bob Dylan is indisputably at a high point in his career. He'd have others in the following decades, but right now, this is arguably the most influence he will ever have as an artist. He's certifiably a rock star. On Bringing It All Back Home and Highway 61, folk hero Bob Dylan had gone electric. This was really controversial for him at the time. Now it just seems like laughably natural for him to pick up an electric guitar. While yes, he's one of the most popular and influential musicians in the world, he had the Beatles going folk to keep up with him. Dylan was also one of the most hated musicians at this time. The folkies did not like that Dylan had gone electric, and he was getting booed at quite literally every single show he played. We will talk about a very specific incident later. As an artist, you can pretend getting booed at every show doesn't bother you. To deal with that, you need to build up a really thick skin. You need to put up a wall between yourself and your audience, and that's what Dylan had to do. Joan Baez said that he changed, and she wasn't wrong. At this time, Dylan was living a very bohemian life in New York City. He was at the Chelsea Hotel, and he was hanging around various troupes of artists, poets, and musicians. These circles naturally overlapped with Andy Warhol, his factory, and the Warhol superstars. Dylan's ire for Warhol partly inspired his greatest hit, but that is a conversation for a Highway 61 video. Instead, we will be talking about Edie Sedgwick, a dancer, model, and Warhol's favorite superstar in 1965 and 1966. Her path crossed with Dylan at some point, and she has reportedly inspired Just Like a Woman. There's also a solid case to be made for Edie inspiring Leopard Skin Pillbox hat. She was known for romping around New York in her oversized leopard coat. As if Dylan's life wasn't already enough in flux, in late '65, he married his first wife, Sarah Dillon, and in January, they welcomed their first son. Work on Blonde started in New York in October of '65 and went through to about January of '66. This work took place at Columbia's 7th Avenue studio. He was recording with the Hawks, but things just weren't working out. Only one song from these sessions made it on the album, and that song is One of Us Must Know. Per the suggestion of producer Bob Johnston, Dylan moves the production out to Nashville. Johnston's home base was in Nashville, and he knew a lot of musicians to hook Dylan up with. Recording in Nashville took place between February and March of 1966 at Columbia Studio B, and these sessions went a lot better. They cut Absolutely Sweet Marie first, and you can hear the very first take of it on Bootlegs Volume 12. It's amazing how fully formed that song was when they went in. You could tell that Dylan and his musicians were very well rehearsed. And that's because they had just been on tour before this. That's a big part of why Dylan's voice sounds the way it does on Blonde. It's not that he didn't care about how he sounded, it's just that he was blowing his voice out from using it so much. With Sweet Marie, the guys were able to set the tone of what Blonde on Blonde was gonna be. Whether Dylan liked it or not, he was the life of the party. When he said the party was over, when he was unhappy, the party was over. But when he was happy, things went smoothly, things were productive, and things got a little silly. The thing about Blonde on Blonde recording is it went really, really late into the night. So light-hearted, goofy Dylan plus late night delirium, and the guys shooting the shit, that equals Rainy Day Women. Recording ended with I Want You. Dylan mixed the album in April before he went back out on tour, and just like that, they had a record. Well, they had more than just one record. The Nashville sessions were so productive that there was enough material for 2 discs. Therefore, Blonde on Blonde is a double album. It's arguably the first double album in rock and roll. I don't know if it was the very first, but This one certainly brought the format of the double album to mainstream attention. As we go into the track listing, I will be putting these on the screen because there is a lot to keep track of, and holy shit, these are some of the longest song titles I've ever had to read out on Vinyl Monday. The track listing goes as follows. Opening up side 1, you have Rainy Day Women numbers 12 and 35, followed by Pledging My Time. Then comes Visions of Joanna, and closing out side 1 is Sooner or Later, One of Us Must Know. Side 2 opens with I Want You, followed by Stuck Inside a Mobile with the Memphis Blues again. This is followed by Leopard Skin Pillbox Hat, and side 2 closes with Just Like a Woman. Side 3 opens with Most Likely You'll Go Your Way and I'll Go Mine, followed by Temporary Like Achilles, then Absolutely Sweet Marie, and Fourth Time Around. And side 3 closes with Obviously Five Believers. Side 4 is taken up entirely by one song, Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands. Considering Blonde on Blonde being a double album, it sure does feel like they slapped everything they recorded onto this thing. But they didn't. There were a few songs recorded but left off the final track listing. The most notable of these songs is I'll Keep It With Mine. Dylan wrote this in 64-ish, handed it off to Judy Collins to be recorded in 65, and Nico famously recorded her version on her album Chelsea Girl. People forget about Nico outside the context of, VU and Andy Warhol and Lou Reed, but Nico recorded some pretty cool stuff. Blonde on Blonde was released in June of 1966. Yes, it was released in June. There used to be a lot of confusion surrounding the release date of this album because, get this, nobody bothered to write it down. Which, honestly, that is the most 66 Dylan thing I've ever heard. This may seem like I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here. This is usually the point in the video where I talk about the album's release and reception, but just bear with me. This material sounds the best on Bootlegs Volume 4, live at Royal Albert Hall. These recordings were actually made at the Manchester Free Hall performance on May 17th, 1966, but they were mislabeled for a long time as being the Royal Albert Hall show. If you want the real Royal Albert Hall show, this is it. I love filming Dylan videos because then I just get to pull all of my Dylan albums out of the shelves. The recordings taken at the Manchester show happened to capture one of the most iconic moments in rock and roll history. So quite a bit of the Blonde on Blonde material was debuted live. I believe a few songs were debuted at the Manchester show. He was still getting booed at every show. Things were pretty chill during the Manchester acoustic set. He played old favorites like It's All Over Now, Baby Blue, Mr. Tambourine Man. He played all of Desolation Row, but when he plugged in and brought the rest of the band out, things started to get a little dicey. Animosity had been building in the crowd all night, and the inflection point was right before the very last song. Some bitter folkie stands up and shouts this. In response, Dylan leans into the mic and says, "I don't believe you, you're a liar," then turns to his band and tells them to play it fucking loud. And they round out the Manchester show with maybe the angriest version of Like a Rolling Stone you will ever hear. That moment right there was the inflection point of 66 Dylan. It was a blatant refusal. Dylan keeps trucking on with performances for a while after the Judas show. He's living very, very fast. That is until he crashes his motorcycle in Woodstock and is forced to take a year off to recuperate. After whatever happened that day, I don't think we'll ever know the full story of Dylan's motorcycle crash, he retreats from the public eye, and the golden era of Dylan comes to a very abrupt end. When he comes back, things are drastically different. I feel as though Dylan might have been grateful for that pause to recuperate, both to start a family and settle down, and to come back to music with a fresher, better rested set of eyes and ears. If Dylan kept singing the way he did on Blonde, he would have totally blown his voice out by 68. No, hey, we're getting into my thoughts now. So what do I think of Blonde? Well, I lived this album. I lived in a tiny college apartment with 6 other people. When I say tiny, I mean tiny. Our kitchen was so small that we had to brew coffee in some random little corner on the floor of our living room. I brought about 100 records and my full surround sound stereo system into my 7-foot by 9-foot bedroom. Not only were we in a tiny apartment, I also got the smallest bedroom. And Blonde was one of those records that I brought. We lived in this apartment complex with all of our friends from back then, and we came from all walks of life. We studied the sciences, music, psychology. I was the token art student, and it was an outdoor complex of 4 buildings, so we could all just walk right in and see each other whenever we wanted. We were entirely forgotten by campus PD, so we could do whatever the hell we wanted. And we partied 24/7. The party quite literally didn't stop until March of 2020, when we all were unceremoniously sent home. They said, that's it, pack up, you're done, party's over. That bohemian, thin, wild, Mercury life that I was living back then, it wasn't sustainable. It couldn't last forever, and like 66 Dylan, it all had to end very abruptly with our motorcycle crash moment. Blonde was the soundtrack to the most bohemian part of my life, and it has a huge piece of my heart because of it. This is my favorite Dylan album, hands down. Partly because I lived it, partly because I heard the material on Bootlegs 4 first, and partly because this is some great Dylan songwriting. Lots of acute world observations made vague, and sweet moments cut by really crass remarks. It's very tongue-in-cheek. The way I like to describe 66 Dylan songwriting is the narrator is pulling you in with one hand and pushing you away with the other. And then you have Stuck Inside a Mobile, which is like an uncomfortable amount of characters all in one narrative. It's like Desolation Row on steroids. I never understood likening Dylan to a rock star until I examined the instrumentation of Blonde. This Dylan wields a harmonica like most other rock stars would wield a guitar. It is a treat to listen to, even if it can be just a little grating. I can't talk at length about every single song on here, seeing as it's a double album, but I'm gonna try my best to point out the highlights. Everybody must get stoned. You gotta trudge through Rainy Day Women and Pledging My Time to get to the gold. They're very off-putting for a first-time listener, and I get why those tracks came first. It was to weed out anyone and everyone who wasn't ready for Dylan's new direction. It's like the circus from hell. Send in the clowns! But there's something really cool that happens with the harmonica on Pledging My Time. It fades out before the rest of the song fades out. So it's like you're walking through the sound and away from it. Once you walk through the big top of freaks and absolutely demented harmonica solos, we get to one of the best songs in Dylan's catalog. That Pledging My Time harmonica, it's lifting up the curtain of the big top to reveal Visions of Joanna. Visions of Joanna tells the story of a beautiful, surreal, impossible night in New York City after they were hit by a blizzard. It's all the most beautiful parts of bohemian living, hopping from station to station, party to party, apartment to apartment, lit by flashlights and candles because the storm knocked your power out. You get all these vignettes apparently from the same night, probably from different points of view, and then you get one of the most honest lyrics in any Dylan song. Little boy lost, he takes himself so seriously. He brags of his misery, he likes to live dangerously. At surface level, this is how the public sees Dylan. But dig a little deeper, and this is just my opinion here, it's kind of like Dylan calling himself out. I will say, when you've listened to Visions of Joanna as many times as I have, it becomes glaringly obvious that this is more than one vocal take stitched together. The stitches were very obvious. Sooner or Later, One of Us Must Know is a great example of what I call Dylan's impressionistic singing. It's where he has an idea of a note that he'd like to hit, and he just kind of throws his voice up to the rafters, and if he doesn't get it, oh well. It's like tying your shoes together and throwing them over the telephone line. And he has an excuse for singing like that. His voice was shot. And the lyrics describe the situationship of the century. This theme of the situationship pops up in quite a few songs on Blonde on Blonde. I love when Dylan gets a little mean. It happens on Ballad of a Thin Man over on Highway 61, it happens on Like a Rolling Stone, and it happens on Leopard Skin Pillbox Hat. Fourth time around is the Realizing You're Still in Love with Your Ex song. I'm pretty sure this song is about Dylan realizing he was in love with Sarah when he was with somebody else. Obviously, Five Believers references to Rainy Day Women a little bit. It's like the big finale of the circus, and it's sending all of us home. But then you get Sad-Eyed Lady on the D side. And that, you guys might laugh at me for this, but Sad-Eyed Lady is my favorite Dylan song. Yes, the 11-minute song professing his love to his wife. It's the song that made me fall in love with Dylan. Literally. I first heard Sad-Eyed Lady and a lot of Blonde on Blonde on a road trip. This was 12:30 in the morning in a dark, cold hotel room somewhere in Virginia by the time I had gotten to Sad-Eyed Lady. And I was actually choking on my tears as not to wake up my family. That was a life-changing moment for sure. I don't love making up my own stories behind songs, but I feel comfortable imagining Dylan staying up for days in the Chelsea Hotel, writing this 11-minute long epic for his wife and his newborn son. 66 Dylan's world was very changeable and very precarious, and everything probably felt like a tightrope, and Sarah and his new family, they were the net at the bottom. After the show is all over, and we're sweeping the glitter and the confetti up, and the clowns have been sent home, the ringmaster and his lady are having a private moment. It's kind of the, see, I'm doing all of this for you. Blonde on Blonde captured a scattered, rough, wily, spontaneous, unstable, perfect time in Dylan's life, and that time couldn't have existed for very long. He needed to have a safety net somewhere. It wasn't sustainable, but he thought to immortalize it through taking blurry photographs of his world through his words. Photos of a favorite suede jacket, of binoculars hanging from a strand of jewels, fishmongers loading up the truck early in the morning, broken glass in the street, a shared stick of gum, Everything mundane makes a beautiful time, and we don't know it's beautiful a lot of the times until it's behind us. We are so lucky to have this photo album in the form of Blonde on Blonde. My personal favorites are Visions of Joanna, Sooner or Later, Just Like a Woman, Absolutely Sweet Marie, Fourth Time Around, and Sad-Eyed Lady. If you want to keep up with all my favorites, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description of all of my favorite songs from every Vinyl Monday ever. And that is it. That is Bob Dylan's Blonde on Blonde. What do you think of this album and of this period in Bob Dylan history? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you have to say about the records that I love. And if you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday every Monday morning at 11 a.m. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!